What's up, guys? It's DDR Freak, the Ginger Beard Man. Got another awesome video for you today. This one was actually chosen by my community. I did a poll, kind of a question on one of my live streams a couple weeks ago, and this video was the winning choice. So if you're not following me on my live streams, you're missing out. Just saying. I'll have the links down below here. You should go give me a follow, because you could have taken part in this. But today, we are talking about the Sega Saturn. By all accounts, the Sega Saturn was the first true 32-bit console to hit the market. Sega had released the 32X add-on for the Genesis back in 1994, mainly as a way to keep customers entertained until they could announce the real star of the show, which had a totally epic and triumphant entrance. Or not. Here in the States, the Saturn was supposed to launch on Saturn Day, September 2nd, 1995. And then that didn't happen? Question mark? So get this. Sega of America CEO Tom Kalinske goes up on stage at the first ever Electronic Entertainment Expo, E3 1995. He's getting the crowd excited. He's hyping up this amazing console that's had just blockbuster sales in Japan. And then he announces that they've already shipped 30,000 units and they're available now. Wait, what? Nobody was ready for this. KB Toys pulled their retail space deal with Sega. Best Buy was furious. Toys R Us said, "This is the first we've heard of it." And then the worst happened. Sony announced the PlayStation would be $100 cheaper that same conference. Everything that could have gone wrong for Sega there went wrong. You wouldn't know it from the show floor, though. There was a definite interest in the system, just not nearly as much as Sony. But what's even weirder than this? In Japan, the Saturn outsold the PlayStation by a factor of almost 2-1 back when both consoles launched in 1994. By the time Kalinske got up on stage and shoved his foot all the way down his throat, Sega had already shipped over 1 million consoles in Japan. They even had a killer spokesman in Japan, Segata Sanshiro, a parody of the famous judo wrestler Sugata Sanshiro. Segata Sanshiro was the face of the console in Japan from 1997 until 2000, when Sega finally discontinued the console in Japan. He even had a killer theme song. Asobi no michi tamashi komete hitori no otoko wa kyou mo yuku majime ni asobanu yatsura ni wa karada de oboe saseru zo Segata Sanshiro Segata Sanshiro Sega Saturn Shiro. Yeah, I taught myself how to sing that just for this. You know, if I'm gonna have to deal with the YouTube copyright, the automated system, I'm gonna do everything I can to fool it. Modern problems require modern solutions.
Others are still inside. Save them. Help!
So, what went wrong? Why would this amazing, great-selling console suddenly flop? There were a number of factors that went into this. First, the price. Here in the States, the Sega Saturn launched at a price of $399. Adjusted for inflation, that comes out to $678.94. That's a lot, even by modern standards. With Sony undercutting them even at launch, that really hurt the console. Second, there were very few games on the system. When the console launched in America, there were just a handful of titles available, and none were particularly in demand. While Japan had Virtua Fighter propping up sales numbers, we had Bug, Clockwork Knight, and not much else. The killer apps like Die Hard Arcade, Nights into Dreams, and Panzer Dragoon, they wouldn't come out until later. The third point ties into the second. There weren't many games for the system because Sega had a hard time finding publishers willing to make games for the console. Again, Sony undercut Sega by making the developer fees much cheaper. It was also easier to make games for the Saturn than the PlayStation. All these factors came together to create a perfect storm of problems for Sega. If there was ever a reason to simplify your hardware, the Sega Saturn is it. The main reason why development was so difficult was because the API was garbage, but that was compounded by the complexity in the hardware. The Sega Saturn has 8 individual processors in it. From a technical standpoint, the hardware under the hood was impressive at the time. 2 groundbreaking new processors working in tandem, 2 advanced video display chips, RAM out the wazoo, and a dedicated sound processor came together to make a sleek, sexy powerhouse of a console. But with all that power came a whole lot of complexity. And it wouldn't be Sega if they didn't make some mistakes along the way. The API was such a joke that developers had to resort to writing their games in assembly instead of the prevailing C programming language. If you're not familiar with software development, that's like using your muscles to lift your car instead of grabbing a jack for an oil change. It'll work, sure, but it's unnecessary, cumbersome, and it makes your life miserable. So yeah, big mistake from Sega on that one. So, another really weird thing about the Sega Saturn is these obnoxiously tall cases for the games. I don't know if they were trying to compete with like the shelf space for like your VHS tapes, but these are just like such a weird thing. And they did this everywhere except for Japan. And I don't get it. I really don't. Especially when you can compare them with what you get in Japan. Speaking of, can we take a moment to appreciate the gorgeous artwork on the back of the House of the Dead? I mean, this is just straight beautiful. Just saying. This is awesome.
Are you okay?
I was so scared.
So if you haven't already figured it out by now, the Sega Saturn really didn't do 3D all that well. It's clunky, it doesn't dither right, sometimes it looks straight up disjointed. I mean, it's a mess. The only games that had decent 3D were Daytona USA, and even that was an inferior port of the arcade release. A lot of this goes back to the complications mentioned earlier with the hardware. 2 CPUs shared the same bus, which slowed down the power of the console. So you had all this processing power and you couldn't do anything with it. That said, sprite-based games look amazing. Street Fighter Alpha 2 looks great, and the hand-drawn sprites in a stall are just plain gorgeous. It's the sprite-based games that really make this console shine, and they are really, really awesome. Here's a stall, just for example.
Get away from me, you stupid bird. Quit following me.
And this is Street Fighter Alpha 2. And by the way, here's Asuka 120% Burning Fest Limited. What is it with Japanese games and ridiculously long titles? I don't get it, but hey, here we are. So, just saying, I like my Saturn. It's got a lot of great games for it, some that are very near and dear to my heart, and I get all mushy over it. You know how it goes. But yeah, I'm actually going to be doing a video about collecting for the Saturn because I think it's worth collecting, I think it's worth going after, and I got some tips to share with you guys as well. Stuff to look out for, things like that. And yeah, this video is going up on Library first and then on YouTube, so if you're not following me on either platform, you might want to do that, because you could get a sneak peek on Library. Just saying. And I'll be streaming tonight, starting at about 8 p.m. Eastern. And yeah, I think you should come hang out, say hi. As always, got the links down below for all the fun places to come follow me. And as always, I'm DDR Freak, the Ginger Beard Man, signing off. You guys have yourselves a great rest of your day. Later. Or not. I forgot my line. Here the stairs comes. Hyping a crowd. 30,000 units that are available now. Or not. I'm gonna get this.